the blackest blade in Warhammer 40,000. Before the hatch opened, the world beyond it was already dying, and the thing it feared most was not the demon waiting in the city, it was me. I wonder how long I have been in this cell. 2 meters by 2 meters, lead in 3 layers. The floor is a solid grate. Beneath it another sheet of lead. The ceiling too. 1 lamp, 1 ventilation slit, 1 viewing window the size of a palm, and behind it an eye. The white is yellowed, the pupil swollen like the eye of a man gravely ill. He is a sailor, my guard. They chained him to his post because otherwise he would have run. I hear him retching, softly, tightly into his sleeve. He cannot see me. The window is darkened glass, but he knows I am here, and that is enough. The body always knows. The ship trembles. The low guttural roar of the engines passes through the soles of the feet, through the grate, through the bones. The Aquila Nullies, assault frigate of the Redicus host, 400 meters of sanctified and branded death. 3,000 crew. All of them know that in the hold, behind 7 bulkheads, behind 3 guard posts, behind a lead door with 2 locks and an inquisitorial seal, someone or something is sitting. When the captain took delivery of the cargo, he made the sign of the Aquila and refused to look my way. His first officer, standing beside him, fainted. Simply fainted, fell onto the deck, and blood poured from his nose. And all I had done was walk down the corridor in my helmet, with the dampers set to minimum. Other souls have a smell. I know people dislike it when I say that. They ask, how can you sense a soul if you have no soul of your own? They think it is a good argument, a logical one. But that is like telling a blind man he cannot judge darkness. I was born in darkness. I am darkness. I feel every little flame in you, greasy, smoking, trembling in the draft. The sailor behind the glass smells of sour milk and copper. That is fear. Standard human fear of something the brain cannot classify. He does not understand why he feels sick. Nobody taught him to understand. He simply knows on some level beneath logic, beneath words, on the level where the lizard inside the skull controls everything. He knows that behind this wall sits a thing with no reflection in the warp. A hole, a tear, a dent in the fabric of reality. The ship shudders harder. Descent. We are entering atmosphere. The hull moans like a wounded animal. I like that sound. It is alive, meaningful, understandable. Metal overheats, roars, resists. There is honesty in that, unlike people. People lie. They say the emperor protects and turn away. They say, we value your service and will not take your hand. They say, you are the sword of mankind. And then they lock you in a lead box because otherwise the ship seer will dream nightmares before eve, and the navigator will not endure my presence for long. I am used to it, truly. No, that is a lie I try to tell myself. The lamp flickers. 1 second later the horn sounds. Readiness for deployment. Below us on the planet Centaurus 4, there is a warp storm, a cult of Tzeentch, and 200,000 converts who 3 months ago were ordinary citizens of the Imperium. The Astra Militarum threw 4 regiments at them and lost half in the first week. Not to bullets, not to blades, but to madness. Soldiers woke and did not recognize their comrades. They cut their own throats with bayonets because the voices told them to. They fired into empty air and swore they had seen a great eye staring down at them from the sky. Then the commander requested a special asset. Inquisitor Rowan Black signed the Sicarium warrant. And now I am here. I do not know the name of the sailor behind the glass. He most likely does not know mine. But I see how he presses himself against the far wall, how his cheekbones have sharpened over the 6 hours he has stood at his post. People feel ill near me. Nausea, trembling, irrational panic, migraine, the sensation of a strange hand at the back of the neck where no hand is. The body loses its mind in the presence of something that fits no category. Not enemy, not friend, not beast, not man. The body simply screams, wrong, wrong, run. And it stores adrenaline for a flight that will never happen. Because chain, because order, Because in the Imperium they shoot you for desertion faster than my cold can squeeze the last calm from your mind. I close my eyes. The planet was called Drake Hollow, a hive world. One of those worlds where even the air sounds tired. Above were spires, cathedrals, traffic arteries, sacred processions, faces of the Emperor in gold and neon. Below was the Underhive. Down there the Emperor had a different face, rusted, twisted, drawn in charcoal on the wall beside a drain where warm water the color of machine oil stood knee-deep. I lived there, ate there, slept there, rotted alive there like everyone around me. My home was a niche between two heating mains on the 43rd lower tier of Rowan Ash sector. If I lay on my side and pulled my knees up, I could wedge myself entirely inside. The metal walls were always warm, sometimes hot, sometimes so scorching that I had to put wet rags beneath me or the skin on my back would blister. But it was still better than sleeping in the open passage, where at night people cut throats over filtered water, and in the morning they pull boots from corpses before the bodies have cooled. I had a tin cup, a knife with a broken tip, and a sack of synthetic cloth. Everything I owned was in that sack. 3 battery cells, 2 wire rat snares, a length of cable, a candle stub, an old work mask with a cracked visor, and a little brass aquila missing one wing. I found it in a sump, cleaned it, carried it in my pocket. Not faith, just habit. In the Underhive, even atheists become superstitious. In the morning, I crawled out of my crack and knew at once the day would be bad. The ventilation was pushing thick smoke down from the upper levels. That meant a workshop was burning somewhere, or another purge was underway. Coughing came from the next corridor. An old man called Wren sat on a crate, wrapped in chemical tarpaulin, warming his hands over a burning puddle of promethium sludge. "You again," he said when he saw me. I stopped and did not come closer. Nobody liked me too close. "Who were you expecting?" "Anybody but you," he muttered and spat into the fire. "You sour the morning." I wanted to answer with something sharp, but did not. With Wren, I had something almost like peace. In the Underhive that already counts as friendship. I went around him and climbed into a service duct leading to the spent cable wells. Usually 2 kinds of people climb into places like that, the desperate and the ones who no longer care. I was both. Among the hanging bundles you could find scraps of copper, pieces of insulation, sometimes whole connectors. Above that was waste. Below it was food for 3 days. The well was hot as the throat of a reactor. Sweat burned my eyes. I moved slowly sideways, feeling the wall with my palm. Then I heard voices. 2 scrap men, judging by the curses, from Briggs' crew. They were already inside, farther down the passage. One shone a lamp, and the beam slid across my mask and froze. "Holy Throne, it is him," the first said. "Who?" "The Hollow." That was what they called me most often. Sometimes the faceless one, sometimes the cold one, sometimes just "get that filth away." The words changed. The tone never did. "We are leaving," said the second. "There is salvage there, take it yourself." He was already backing toward the hatch. The first tried to hold his ground, even took a step toward me, clenching cutters in his hand. I could see by his face how he was talking himself into it. This was not a demon, not a mutant with claws, just a thin man in a filthy mask. Just a man, just hit him. Just take the sack. He took another step and another. Then his face suddenly went white. His mouth opened on its own without words. The cutters fell from his fingers. "I cannot," he breathed. "I cannot, damn you." He bent double and vomited straight onto the cable grate. The second was already scrambling back to the hatch, scraping his gloves on the rusted rungs. I walked past them slowly, not looking. I did not need a fight. A fight requires touching, and people endure my touch worse than a knife under the ribs. That was what my life looked like. Not a heroic struggle for survival, not a hunt for monsters in the Underhive. Duller, dirtier. You enter a room and people step back. You ask for water and they throw it to you from a distance. You sit by the common fire and the fire immediately stops being common. Once I tried to get work, not from hope, from exhaustion. On the lower levels of Nault sector there was a sorting yard. They stripped hull debris, condemned servitor assemblies, junk dropped down from the manufactorums. For one hard shift they paid a ration of protein gruel and the right to sleep under a roof. The yard master, a fat man with a mechanical jaw, looked me over and said, "Papers." I laughed. "No," I said, "but I have hands, I have a back, I know how to keep quiet." The emperor loves the diligent, and the diligent love to eat. He was silent for a moment, then jabbed a finger toward the conveyor. "Try there." I worked exactly 27 minutes, a record probably. At first it went tolerably. The clatter of the belt, the hiss of the presses, workers swearing. I almost believed I could stand through the shift. Then the woman to my right cut her palm on the edge of a sheet of metal. When I reached by reflex to hand her a rag, our hands came too close. She shuddered, not from pain but from me. "Get him away," she said softly. The master did not hear. After 1 minute 2 workers were already staring my way. After 2, someone made the sign of the Aquila. After 3, the boy at the next station began bleeding from the nose. After 5, they stopped the belt. "He is cursed," said the woman, clutching the cut. "I am telling you he is cursed." "I am only standing here," I answered. "Exactly," someone shouted from behind. "He just stands there and everything inside turns over." The master came himself. His metal jaw clicked faster than usual. "Out," he said. "Pay me for half an hour at least. Out." I did not argue. Arguing with a crowd is like explaining to a starving pack that you are not meat. When I stepped into the corridor, my cup flew after me, then my sack, then the knife. No one stole them. That says much about my gift. People near me preferred even to steal from a safe distance. By evening the underhive had changed. Sometimes you feel that before you understand it. The noise had become ragged. Scraps of orders ran through the Vox nodes. Local gangs hid deeper in their holes, and that was a serious sign. If those bastards leave the streets, something is coming down from above that frightens everyone. I sat beside a drainage ditch and ate a raw rat. Yes, like that, without dressing it up. I ate it while the meat was still warm. The ditch stank of chemicals and rot. A human hand floated past, just a hand with no body. I watched it drift by and thought that the day had turned out quite ordinary after all. Then all the sirens began howling at once, long and low, as though the hive itself were crying from pain. A patrol of arbiters came out of the dark. 6 of them, shields, shotguns, shock mauls. They did not walk, they squeezed everything living out of the corridor. "Back to your holes," the sergeant roared through an amplifier. "Clear the passage immediately, by order of the Holy Inquisition." People scattered like roaches under a searchlight. I did not move, not from courage. I simply did not know where to run, and if the Inquisition had come below, it was already too late to hide. Behind the arbiters came others, 3 in matte black armor without regimental marks, faces fully hidden, lead plates and protective seals along the sides of their helmets, not arbiters, not guard, not local. And beside them, a woman in a long gray coat, no helmet, shaved head, thin silver threads at her temples. She walked slowly, almost lazily, but people recoiled from her faster than from the shields. One young arbiter turned his head toward her too sharply and instantly tore off his respirator, as if he could not breathe. "Do not look at her, idiot," barked the sergeant. I stood not because they noticed me, but because for the first time in years I felt something familiar nearby. Not even familiar kin. The woman did not carry a human background. She did not smoke, did not press. Around her the air held the same dry silence that lived around me. Not complete, different, but close enough that I froze. She stopped at the edge of the ditch. Pale eyes slid down the corridor, not settling on anything, then rested on me. "There he is," she said. The Arbiter Sergeant swore under his breath. "Confirmed?" asked one of the black-armored men. "Confirmed," she answered. "Strong, unstabilized. He cannot be left here long." Left here long, as if I were a leaking reactor. One of them moved toward me. I stepped back. "Easy," he said. His voice came through the vox and turned flat, lifeless. "You are coming with us." "And if I do not?" He did not answer. The white-eyed woman answered for him. "Then they will try to break you, then bind you, then take you anyway." "Where?" She looked at me as if deciding how much truth I could bear. "To a black ship. After that, wherever they decide." A nervous whisper ran through the corridor. People were no longer hiding. They pressed against the walls and looked at me with the expression I knew too well, relief mixed with disgust, as if someone were finally carrying a corpse out of a house where it had lain too long in a locked room. "Is he a witch?" someone asked. "Worse," another answered. I nearly laughed. People always fear what they can name, but what truly warps them is what has no name. "Do I have a choice?" I asked. The woman came closer, right up to me. The arbiters behind her visibly tensed. One even turned his face away. "Choice," she repeated. "In the Imperium, on the lower levels. Do not make me laugh." I said nothing. She held out a bare hand. Narrow palm, pale skin, an old burn on the wrist. "But you have a chance," she said more softly. "For things like us, that is almost luxury." The word "us" struck harder than the sirens. I looked at her hand and did not move. Behind me the ditch dripped. Somewhere power was shorting out. The arbiters held the passage. People along the walls breathed through fear and loathing. My whole world fit into one corridor, one outstretched hand, one question with no pretty answer. "Tell me your name," I said. She smiled almost imperceptibly, sadly, as if she had known I would ask exactly that. "I have not had one in a long time." That was when I knew I would go. Not for them, not for the Imperium, not for the chance, but for that phrase, for how it sounded ordinary and quiet, like a sentence already served. I put my hand in hers. She did not flinch. The first living person in years who did not flinch. The arbiters closed around us at once. They threw a gray, isolating cloak over me, heavy, stitched with leaden threads. The world grew duller. The people along the walls drew back even farther. Someone whispered a prayer, someone spat after us, someone made the sign of the Aquila. We went up the corridor. I did not look back. Only at the first lift did I ask, "Did you lie about the chance?" The woman did not answer for a long time. The lift hummed, hauling us upward through layers of stink, metal, soot, and human meat. Then she said, "I do not know yet." And that was the most honest answer I had ever heard. The lift went up so long that I stopped understanding whether we were moving at all, or simply standing inside an iron throat growling in my face. The floor trembled under the boots of the arbiters. The gray cloak thrown over me in the underhive had soaked up other people's sweat, machine oil, and old dust. The cloth smelled of a storehouse where they keep things for those they no longer count as human. When the doors finally parted, a different air struck my face. Dry, cold, tasting of disinfectant. They led me in silence, first through service corridors of the hive, then through a sealed gangway, then through an airlock. I remember only one thing. On the final passage, the floor beneath my feet changed, began to spring slightly. Somewhere deep in the hull reactors hummed, and this hum no longer had anything to do with the hive world. This was a ship, a large ship, very large, a ship whose own heart could be heard in the bones. "Keep moving," one of the escorts said. "And if I slow down?" He turned his helmet toward me, but did not answer. The white-eyed woman answered instead. "Then they will lift you with a shock maul and take you there anyway," she said. "Do not make them nervous. They are already forcing themselves." I grinned. I had noticed. One arbiter on the right clinched. his shock maul so hard the glove creaked. Then the black ship began. I did not know its name then. Later I heard it from a tech priest in the docking bay. Sanctum Shadow. For people like me, such names change nothing. Mercy of the Emperor, Shepherd of Souls, whatever they call it, the meaning is the same. Into its belly they carry those whom the Imperium cannot bear beside itself, but fears too much to kill at once. The corridors were narrow, black, with lead glass plates and litanies of protection set into the bulkheads. Wax seals crawled along the seams. On every door the aquila, a skull, hexagrammatic cuts. Someone had tried very hard to convince the metal it was holier than madness. The metal did not seem to object. The people inside certainly did. I felt the first psyker before I saw him. He was behind two bulkheads, behind a door with a window a finger thick, but his soul already smoked the air as though a fat candle burned nearby. Only an ordinary candle gives light and a little warmth. This light scratched from within. It made me want to scrape out my eyes and wash my skull with ice water. I slowed, not from fear, from curiosity. The white-eyed woman noticed. "You feel them. And they feel me." She nodded once. "Already." We turned onto the holding deck, and there it began. Cells ran along both sides of the corridor. Solitary chambers, barred blocks, capsules with cables, restraint chairs, even hanging sarcophagi for those too dangerous for common steel. Inside sat men and women, shaved, overgrown, bruised by shackles, with runes stitched onto their robes, with eyes clouded by sedatives. Some muttered prayers, some laughed to themselves, some simply stared at the floor and saved what remained of their sanity. Until they saw me. First one lifted his head, then another jerked against his cot as if a needle had been driven into her spine. 1 second later the wave went down the row. I cannot find a more precise word. A wave. People in the cages began to back away. The walls were already behind them. One old man with the burned brand of a sanctioned psyker on his skin clutched the bars, not to reach me, but to keep himself standing. A woman in the next cell covered her face with her elbows and hissed through her teeth as though acid had been poured over her. A shaved man with the tattoo of an astropathic choir on his neck simply began to howl, low and animal. One escort on the left muttered, "Damnation." "Hold formation," barked the sergeant. We walked on, and the screaming walked with us. Ordinary people near me feel nausea, trembling, panic. The body screams before the mind. With psykers it is worse. They do not merely sense the wrongness. They live with their faces pressed into the warp like workers at a furnace. And I am not a cold wind to them. I am a hole in the furnace wall, through which all the heat is sucked out at once. The mind has no time to understand. It simply hears the familiar background of the world, tearing with a crack and battering against the bones like a bird against glass. One prisoner threw himself at the bars so violently that he knocked out 2 teeth. Blood spattered the metal. "Take him away," he screamed. "Take him away. Take that emptiness out of here." "Shut up, witch," said an escort. "I am sanctioned," the man wheezed. I serve, do you hear? That is not a man, that is." He did not finish. He folded double and vomited onto his boots. We went on. The deeper we went into the deck, the louder it became. Someone beat his head against a wall. Someone recited catechism mixed with gutter curses. Behind one door laughter rang thin and shrill without stopping. Behind another, someone sobbed as though an entire city were being buried inside. At the bend, an overseer waited for us. Tall, dry, in a long black coat over armor, with the insignia of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica at his throat. The lower half of his face was covered by a filtration mask, his right cheek replaced by a chrome implant. In his hands were an electroshock rod and a data slate in a lead frame. He looked at me once, and that one look was enough to make him go pale beneath the augmetics. "Why have you dragged that here?" he asked. "Routing order," answered the white-eyed woman. "Transit to transfer station." "Keep it away from my cargo." I turned my head slightly. Your cargo. He shifted his gaze to me, and there was no human hatred in that look. It was professional, cold, and especially unpleasant. Yes, he said. Mine. Those ones at least I can catalog. Alpha, beta, delta, flare risk, possession tendency, level of control. And what are you? Human. He snorted as though he had heard a bad joke. Do not flatter yourself. The woman was already going to take me farther, but from deep within the deck came a scream so powerful that even the ceiling lamps flickered. The overseer cursed and jabbed his rod toward the far sector. Cell 9 again. Sedatives, the woman asked. They do not take. The seals hold every other minute. The navigator above is already complaining about the background. If that thing gets loose, I will have to write off half the deck. He looked at me longer this time. I knew at once what had occurred to him. No, I said. No one asked you. I am not your tool. Already someone else's, he replied, and we still need to live long enough to reach the station. The escort sergeant stepped closer. The shock maul crackled quietly. I looked at the woman with white eyes. She did not look away. It will be quick, she said. For whom? She did not answer. Cell 9 was at the end of the deck, behind 2 shutters and an extra grill. 2 more guards sat by the wall, pressing their hands over their ears and rocking. One muttered, "Do not look, do not look, do not look," though his eyes were closed. Heat came from inside. Not real heat, warp heat. You do not sweat from that heat. You want to tear your own skin off because it suddenly seems foreign. The overseer struck the access rune. The door crawled aside. Inside sat a man chained to a restraint chair. Bare chest, all burned by stabilizing seals. Above his head a crown of wires and blocking needles. His eyes were open so wide the whites gleamed whole. Around him the air rippled, like air above a hot pipe. He has been hearing voices for 2 days, said the overseer. Now the voices have started answering. The psyker saw me. I do not like pretty words about horror. In the Imperium there are too many of them. Every pulpit, every preacher, every officer loves to speak of horror, cleansing, wrath, and other verbal trash. But here no other word fits. He saw me and felt horror. True, clean, childlike, animal, helpless horror of a creature that has suddenly understood the world can be arranged even worse than it believed. No, he breathed. The ripples around him broke into ragged rings. On the ceiling something like a wet shadow appeared. From the shadows in the corners thin fingers stretched out, longer than human fingers. The psyker thrashed in the chair, straps biting into his flesh. The shadow on the ceiling grew thinner as if scraped away by a knife. The fingers in the corners broke, spread into black soot. The air cooled. Do not, he croaked, please not that. Fire is better, better fire. I stopped 3 steps away. He screamed. The scream was short, rough, wordless. Then the light in the cell seemed to sag. Not go out, sag like heavy cloth suddenly dropped from supports. The ripples vanished. The warp heat died. Only the smell of burned meat, the hiss of wires, and a man in a chair remained, trembling so hard his teeth clicked. The overseer exhaled slowly. There, he said, better already. I looked at him. You wanted me to calm him. I wanted him not to breach a bulkhead inside the Imperium, he answered. The rest interests me little. The psyker in the chair lifted his eyes to me. The old power was gone from them. Only wet, sticky fear remained. What are you? He whispered. I answered before I thought. Your opposite. He began to cry. That was when I understood. In the underhive, vagrants feared me, scrap men, drunks, arbiters, ordinary people who simply wanted to keep away from me. Here it was different. Here were the ones the whole human galaxy called cursed. Witches, mutants of the soul, dangerous misbirths of the Emperor and the warp. Some were being carried to feed the golden throne, others for sanctioning, others for dissection, knowledge, or a bullet in the back of the head. And even among them, among this cargo of nightmares, I was the thing they wanted to hide from in the corner and stop existing. Not special. Worse. The overseer ordered the cell shut. When the shutters met, he gestured for them to take me on. We passed into a small observation post behind armored glass. One lumen lamp burned there. A tin cup of cold recaf stood on the table, and on the wall hung the casualty list for the voyage. I did not remember the names, only the numbers. 17 crew, 241 prisoners. The route was not over yet. The overseer removed his mask and finally looked at me like a human being, for a very short time. He had the gray eyes of a man who had long slept in scraps and forgotten how to be surprised. "Sit," he said. I remained standing. "I do not like courtesy on command. And I do not like when 30 cells scream on my deck at once," he answered. "So we are even." He drank cold recaf, grimaced, and asked, "Do you have a name?" I gave it. He wrote it on the slate, then shook his head. "Not for long." "What does that mean?" "It means people like you rarely wear the old name for long. They rename you, number you, take you apart and put you back together if they find a use." "Who are they?" He went silent, tapping a fingernail on the edge of the slate. Behind the glass someone screamed again, farther away on the next tier. "You think black ships take only psykers?" he asked at last. "Psykers are the main catch, little lights. Easy to find when there is someone to look into the warp, but sometimes they catch other defects as well. Voids, holes, people who make even sanctified machines feel sick. Usually such ones are not kept near the cargo, but for you there was a direct request." "From where?" His gaze moved somewhere above my head, as if he already regretted speaking. "From people to whom I do not ask unnecessary questions. And if I do not want to." This time he smiled, tiredly, almost kindly, the smile of a man who has worked inside a system too long to be angry at its absurdity. "Want or not want? Funny. You are already aboard, already in the registry, already marked. People like you do not disappear back into the underhive. You will either become useful or become an anatomical teaching aid for the biologists. They choose for you." I walked to the glass. Behind it sat a woman in the far cell, 40 perhaps older. Half her face was covered in tattooed seals of restraint. She gnawed her knuckles without taking her eyes from the empty corridor I had entered through. "Why do they react so strongly?" I asked. The overseer was silent for a long time. "Because an ordinary person feels your wrongness with the skin," he said, "and they feel it with everything they are. To them, you are decompression in the void, as though someone tore a piece out of space and forced it to enter the cell on 2 legs. So I am useful. Do not flatter yourself, so am I sometimes." Behind the wall someone struck the bars and shouted, "The hollow is coming. The hollow, lock me in." The overseer put his mask back on. "Take him to the transfer compartment," he ordered the sergeant, "and for the Emperor's sake, do not drag him through the central block. I still have a report to write." When we stepped into the service corridor, the white-eyed woman walked beside me, a little ahead of the escort. For several minutes we were silent. Then I asked, "You knew?" "Yes." "And you still said I would not be alone." She did not stop. "I said that was not about people." "Then what?" Only then did she turn her head. "Function." I liked that word least of all. Then came an airlock, a short transfer tunnel, and a shuttle without windows. They strapped me into a chair with magnetic clamps. The escort stayed outside. Only I, the white-eyed woman, and 2 technicians in smooth masks without insignia went in. One connected a biometric control cable to my collar. The other spent the whole flight looking not at me, but at the gauges, as if that were safer. The engines howled. The shuttle peeled away from the black ship. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To the transfer station," said the woman. "I have heard that already, and after that." After that they will examine you. Like a thing. She nodded almost invisibly. Yes. I laughed, not because it was funny, simply because at some point the body grows tired of choosing between anger and emptiness and produces a sound that resembles laughter. The shuttle jolted. Magnets hummed through the hull. One technician made the sign of the Aquila with a mechanical finger. "Docking in 20 seconds," he said. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine the station. Anything. A monastery, a barracks, a laboratory, a prison. But only one image kept rising in my mind. A knife on a whetstone. Long, cold, still blunt, and patient hands that already know what they will make of it. When the shuttle doors opened, I saw white light. Not warm, hospital light, merciless. 3 waited beyond the airlock. One in a dark uniform without insignia, bald skull, mechanical visor in place of the left eye. The second in a gray surgical coat over body armor. The third not human at all, but a tech priest hung with manipulators and injector rods like a torture frame that had learned to walk. The bald one skimmed the data on a slate and did not even lift his eyes. "Genetic anomaly confirmed," he said. "Cargo reaction matches expectations. Transfer him." The white-eyed woman hesitated for the first time. "He is conscious," she said. "For now," the bald one answered. Then he finally looked at me. "From this moment, you belong to the temple." I wanted to ask which temple. I wanted to ask what they would do to me. I wanted at least to hear a lie softer than the ones in the underhive and on the ship. But the tech priest had already extended a manipulator, and the air smelled of alcohol, cold metal, and something sweet, medical. The smell of an operating room. The smell of a new life, if by new life one means a very long kind of execution. The Culexus Temple. That was the name of the place where they brought me, though I learned that name much later. Officially there was no designation, only coordinates encrypted by a code that changed every 18 standard hours. A classified station hidden from common routes and navigation registries. The location of the temple fortress is one of the most guarded secrets of the Officio Assassinorum. They say the station stands on a planetoid that orbits no sun. I do not know if it is true. I only know that the light of the Astronomicon was barely felt there. Dim, distant, like a fading star at the edge of sight. The first year was tests, endless tests. They put me in a chamber and sent psykers of different levels inside, watching through cameras how fast they lost consciousness. They injected me with chemicals that turned my blood black and my urine orange. They tied me to a table and ran sensors over my body. They read things I did not understand. The tech priests worked in silence. They wore red robes and their hands had been replaced with surgical manipulators. Long, jointed, like insect legs. They spoke to one another in binary, and I heard it as a dry little chittering, like the sound of burning wiring. They explained nothing to me. I was specimen, biomaterial, blank stock. In the 7th month came surgery, the first of 4. They laid me on a table that smelled of old blood, not mine, the blood of previous numbers. A tech priest leaned over me. His face was almost entirely hidden by augmetics. Only one eye, human and pale blue, looked out from among lenses and plates. He recited a litany in binary. Another tech priest brought an injector. "Anesthetic," said the first. His voice came through an external speaker, mechanical but threaded with living intonation. "General, the body will be immobilized. No consciousness." I wanted to ask why, but the needle was already in my neck, and my body switched off at once, as if all wires had been cut. I lay there, looked at the ceiling and felt everything. They drilled my forehead with a small diamond-tipped burr. I saw its reflection in the lens of the tech priest leaning above me. The sound was high, shrill, like a mosquito whine, only inside the skull. Bone dust flew into my eyes and someone, an assistant, dabbed it away with gauze. Then the frontal bone was opened. I saw the tech priest take something small, silver, shining, from a sterile container. A neural interface node, first of many. It prepared my brain for coupling with the animus speculum, the relic helm that would later become my main weapon. The node settled into the cut in the bone, and the tech priest sealed the opening with the care of a man placing an egg in a nest. My eyes shook from the vibration of the drill, and the world jumped before my gaze, breaking into fragments. The second operation was the spine. 5 cable channels from the base of the skull to the lower back, each finger thick, made of fiber optics and psi-conductive alloy. They implanted them not in the skin, but into the periosteum, between the vertebrae along the spinal cord with precision to 1/10 of a millimeter. Because one wrong movement and you are paralyzed forever, or dead, or worse, alive without control of the aura. And a pariah without control is danger to every nearby psyker, and heavy trial for ordinary humans around him. The third operation was the nervous system. Implants turned my body into an ideal conductor of the null aura. Every nerve, every plexus reinforced, calibrated, connected to one network, so my emptiness would flow through me evenly, without jerks, without blockages, so I could guide it as one guides water through channels. The fourth was sensory amplifiers. After the operation, I began to perceive warp distortion differently, not as color, not as sound, but as pressure, as the geometry of pain. The helmet would later magnify this many times. Through the built-in psi-oculum I would see psi traces, red warp activity, find the target through walls and concealment. But even without the helmet I now sensed every psyker within dozens of meters as a warm spot on a sheet of ice. Between operations came training. My mentor was the same man in the black uniform who had met me at arrival. His name was he had no name. He had a number like mine, but in my mind I called him Stone, because being near him was like being near a wall. No response, no ripple. Stone spoke to me only through a Vox speaker behind lead glass that divided the room in two. My half had bare walls, floor, mattress. His half had control console and screens. "You are not restraining," he would say. The voice through the speaker sounded like a knife scraping a plate. "You are pressing." "What is the difference?" Number 771, your emptiness is not a shield to hide behind. It is a blade to cut with. You must learn to compress it to the thickness of a hair, then open it across an entire hall. Control, not force, control. He showed me mental exercises. I had to sit in a room where a psyker was bound under supervision behind the wall, and slowly, millimeter by millimeter, open my aura, spread the void as a man unclenches a fist, finger by finger. The psyker behind the wall would begin to moan, then scream, then thrash, then fall silent. My task was to stop one step before silence, to hold the aura at the edge. They gave me a spectral analyzer and I watched the readings change. Green, yellow, orange, red. Stop on orange, exactly on orange every time. I trained for 2 years. Hundreds of attempts, dozens of failures. 3 psykers died because I did not hold the boundary. Stone did not scold me. He simply said again, and they brought another. There were other lessons too. Invisibility. Stone explained. Your aura is noise. You enter a room and everyone knows something is wrong with them, but knowing and seeing are different. Skin does not help enough, so you must learn yourself. Compress the aura so tightly that a person stands beside you and feels only mild discomfort, like a migraine before rain. He will not understand where the discomfort comes from. He will not turn, will not suspect, and you will enter. We trained on the living. Ordinary people were brought to me, station servants, technicians, cleaners. They were led into a long corridor with 10 doors. I had to walk through that corridor without a single one looking my way. The first 3 months I failed. They turned, went pale, grabbed the walls. One middle-aged technician with oil stains on his robe looked straight at me and began to cry. No reason, no words, just tears. But I learned, slowly, painfully. Month by month I compressed the aura tighter until it became thin as a razor edge, hidden, coiled like a spring. Once in the second year of training, Stone gave me another test. They locked me in a room with 6 other temple trainees. 6 numbers, all about my age, all pariahs, each with his own level, his own power. I had never before been in a room with other blanks. The sensation was strange. Usually I am the only hole in the fabric of reality. Here were 7 holes, 7 sinkholes. The room hummed with our combined presence, a quiet infrasonic pressure that made the temples ache and made you want to press yourself into the wall. No one spoke. We stood and looked at one another. No hostility, no sympathy, no warm recognition, no cold indifference. Simply nothing, like mirrors set opposite each other. Reflection after reflection, vanishing into infinity. Stone watched through cameras. Then he asked over the Vox channel, "What do you feel?" I thought for a long time. "Nothing," I answered, "but it is a different nothing, familiar." "Exactly," said Stone. "Remember it. When you are in the field, and you will be in the field, and you feel that the world is too loud, too bright, too alive, remember this room. Remember the silence. It is yours." Of the 6 trainees, 4 lived to the examination. One girl, number 628, did not survive the spine operation. A cable shifted 0.5 millimeter. She was paralyzed instantly, and the tech priests disposed of her the same day. Disposed was their word, not mine. One boy, number 503, went mad during control training. He opened his aura to maximum and could not close it. His emptiness poured outward like water from a broken dam. Technicians maintaining the station clutched at walls, lost orientation. Some fell to their knees vomiting. A psyker test subject in the neighboring block fell into coma at once. They stopped him with electroshock, drove him back into a cell, suppressed the aura with external dampers, then took him away. I never saw him again. Stone said, disposed. And they brought another. There was one more lesson, the one Stone considered the main one. He called it the lesson of the name. "You have no name," he said from behind the glass. "You have no rank, no regalia, no awards. After missions, records are classified or destroyed. Witnesses are processed, scrubbed if that is deemed necessary. Guardsmen you save may not remember a week later that you were there. Inquisitors who hired you will cross you from their reports. You are a ghost. You work and disappear." He paused. "That is not punishment. It is protection. You cannot be betrayed because you do not exist. You cannot be blackmailed because you have nothing to lose. You cannot be bribed because you have nothing to want." I was silent. Stone looked at me through the glass. I saw his reflection, pale, blurred. "Although no," he corrected himself. "There is one thing you can want. I see it. Every one of you wants it. To be like everyone else, to be warm, to be visible. But that is the only thing we cannot give. Not the temple, not the imperium, not the emperor. It lies beyond any surgery and any training." He turned away from the glass. "Accept it or break. There is no other path." I did not break. After 2 years, he entered my room through the Vox channel and spoke a phrase I will remember until my death. "Examination, tomorrow. An unsanctioned psyker will be brought into the chamber. He will be free, without shackles, without limiters. Your task is to destroy him with your bare hands." He paused. "If you fail, you will be disposed of. Do you know what that means? The temple needs assassins, not waste." I did not sleep that night. I lay on the mattress, stared at the ceiling, and listened to the station pipes hum. The chamber was 10 meters by 10 meters. Bare walls of gray rockreat, low ceiling, one door through which I entered, one opposite. I stood barefoot on the cold floor. Sinskin, my first, still without etherium, without matrices, clung to my body like a second skin, black, matte, drinking light. No helmet, bare hands, empty hands. The second door opened. A man came in, about 40 years old, wasted, hollow-eyed, burns on his wrists from psi shackles. An unsanctioned psyker caught somewhere on the edge of the Imperium, passed through the stream of the black ship, through sorting cells, through interrogation, and judged unfit for sanctioning. Too strong, too unstable, too far gone. He had been sentenced but given a chance to die fighting. Or, depending on whom you ask, I had been given a chance to prove I was worth the resources spent. The man saw me and recoiled, his face twisted. The same grimace I had seen 1,000 times. Disgust, horror, animal and uncontrollable. What he rasped, "What are you?" I did not answer. Stone had taught me not to speak with a target. A target is not a person. A target is a task. The psyker struck first. Fire. He thrust out a hand and flame poured from his palm. White, greasy, roaring, tongues as high as a man. Heat enough to melt steel. The fire reached me and fell apart like plaster from an old wall in flakes, chunks, ash. The tongues of flame collapsed a meter from my face, losing shape, color, heat. I stood in a cloud of gray ash and there was not one burn, not one reddening on my skin. The psyker screamed. He struck again with a telekinetic wave. I felt pressure like a gust of warm wind. The wall behind me cracked. Rockreet crumbled, but I stood. The wave flowed around me the way a river flows around a boulder. The third strike was mental. He tried to break into my mind. I felt a tickle, small, irritating, like a fly beating against a closed window. The psyker froze, stunned. He had struck a wall, smooth, endless, ice-cold, with nothing behind it. Nothing at all. His consciousness, accustomed to the endless noise of the warp, to streams of energy, to thousands of whispering voices, pressed against absolute silence, and it was more terrifying than any demon. I stepped forward. Each step took something from him. A little, then a little more. His face paled, his hands shook. He backed away, and I followed him. Slowly, calmly, like a man walking down a corridor toward his own door. At the far wall, he fell to his knees. "Please," he said, "please do not." I placed my hands on his head. His skull was hot. Psykers are always hot. Their bodies burn warp energy, and the skin grows feverish. From that contrast between his heat and my emptiness, the air between us trembled like air above sun-scorched asphalt. I opened the aura fully, without limiters, without control, for the first time truly. It is hard to describe, and I have tried many times. The closest thing is this. Imagine pulling a rusted nail from rotten wood. There is resistance, creak, grinding, the crack of fibers. There is a moment when the nail is almost out, but stuck on the last millimeter, and you pull harder and the board breaks apart with the nail, and in your hand is a crooked, brown with rust, still warm piece of metal. His link to the warp, his gift, his curse, his power snapped. I felt the thread by which he was stitched to the immaterium go dark, as if something was being torn from the world that was never meant to be torn. His body sagged, his hands unclenched. His eyes, they were brown, I remember, became glassy, empty, like fish eyes on a market stall. He settled onto the floor, an empty shell, skin, bones, organs all still there. But the thing that made him a psyker, the thing that made him alive in the fullest sense, was gone. My void swallowed his gift the way dry earth swallows water. I stood over him and felt nothing. Stone watched through the camera. Then his voice came from the speaker. "Examination passed. Congratulations, number 771. Return to your cell." I returned to the cell, sat on the mattress, and looked at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, from residual resonance, from the foreign energy that had passed through me and gone nowhere. I had killed a man without knife, without bullet, without poison. I had simply erased him from within. The ship shudders one last time. Landing. The pod hits the soil of Centaurus 4 and throws me forward. Straps cut into my shoulders, the lamp goes out. 1 second of silence. Then the hiss of pneumatics. The hatch withdraws. The time for theory is over. The first thing I saw was the sky. It was wrong. I am no painter and no poet. I am a tool trained to kill. But even I can say that sky was sick. It moved, pulsed like the membrane of a stretched drum beaten from inside. Violet veined with crimson, and in places blackness, absolute like the pupil of a dead god. Centaurus 4 had once been an agri-world. Plains, farms, silo towers, 20 million people living simple, hard, honest lives. Grain for neighboring systems, meat, vegetables, 3 holidays a year, and morning prayer to the emperor. Then came change. That was what the locals called it, with a capital in their voices as if it were a name. Change. Someone found a book, or the book found someone, or there had been no book at all, only a whisper in the warp, thin, sweet, promising knowledge. And 200,000 simple farmers heard it and opened the doors. The city nearest my landing point was partly hanging. The left half still stood on the ground, while the right had torn loose from the foundations and hovered 30 meters above the surface, tilted at an angle. Bodies dangled from windows, and I could not tell whether they were alive or dead because they moved, but the movement was wrong. Like puppets, like meat on a hook in a cold room when a vibration passes through the rail. Liquid fell from the sky. I did not know if it was blood, water, acid. It was warm, dripping on the helmet, running down the visor. I wiped the visor with a finger and brought it close. Brown, viscous, heavy with a copper smell. Blood. Blood was falling from the sky. I put on the helmet. Animus speculum. 20 kilograms of psionically charged metal, ceramic, and dark glass. An elongated skull without a lower jaw. One eye lens, dull, dead until activated. From the back of the head, thick corrugated tubes ran to sockets in the spine, where cables were implanted into me. When the helmet settled into place, the world changed. Spectra shifted. Ordinary sight fell to the second plane. The main channel was psionic, and in it I saw what no ordinary eye can see. The city was alive. The warp had seeped into stone, soil, air, water. It pulsed like a tumor, and from every building stretched threads, thin, sticky, glowing with dirty pink light. They ran toward the center, to the throne hall of the former planetary governor, turned into an altar. I stepped from the pod ramp, and the world screamed. I heard it through the helmet, through the cables, through the nervous system. I heard the warp writhe at my presence, as if ice water had been splashed onto a red-hot pan, hissing, crackling steam. Where my foot touched the ground, the nearest distortions of reality shivered. Floating fragments on the right sagged and began to sink slowly. Illusions, faces in walls, whispering voices, figures in fog, tore apart and spread like old cloth. Demons of Tzeentch, small as a hand, blue, with fiery tails and far too many eyes, shrieked at a pitch that would have burst a living man's eardrums. A flock of 20 threw itself at me, spinning in a whirl, bristling with claws and teeth. The weakest did not reach me. 3 meters away, the first began to lose form. Its outline ran, its eyes went dark, its body turned translucent. At 2 meters it fell apart like wet sand, and its essence, a thin scream of immaterial malice, was drawn into my emptiness and vanished. The second, the third, the fourth, one after another, like moths into flame, only reversed, moths into darkness. The larger ones recoiled, squealed, and scattered into the alleys. Even a thing born of the warp knows how to fear. I walked the streets of the dead city. Underfoot crunched bones, glass, fragments of saint statues with shattered faces. Guardsmen thrown here a week earlier lay along the walls. Some dead, some worse. One, eyeless, with symbols of Tzeentch carved into his forehead, sat against a wall and monotonously muttered an equation. Another had opened his own rib cage and laid the ribs neatly out on both sides of his body like parts of a kit. I passed them. I had no way to help. I have no way to help anyone. At the crossroads I met the first living cultist. He stood in the middle of the road, barefoot, in a torn farm overall marked with symbols of Tzeentch painted in blood. His eyes, inhumanly wide, webbed with burst vessels, stared at me. He trembled. His hands were raised, and between his palms danced a little blue flame, a gift from his new god. Power, the first and last in his life. He tried to throw the flame at me. The flame reached the 1 meter mark and went out like a blown match. The cultist looked at his hands, tried again. Nothing. The fire did not come. The voice in his head, that same sweet voice promising knowledge, fell silent for the first time in 3 months. The cultist fell to his knees. Tears poured from his eyes. Real, human, salt tears. For a moment he lost the gift and fell into animal terror, as if for the first time he understood what he had become over those 3 months. His body shook, his hands scraped the asphalt. Would the voice return to him when I left? Would he remain human? I did not know, and I did not stop to find out. I passed him. 2 steps later, the warp threads on the nearest building snapped, and plaster showered from the facade. Ordinary gray, boring plaster. In my presence the weakest spells fell apart, and the stronger ones cracked and misfired. Somewhere to the right in an alley came a groan. I looked and saw a guardsman alive. He lay on his side, pressing a lasgun to his chest, hugging it the way a child hugs a toy. His uniform was torn, a belt served as a tourniquet on his left leg. The wound was serious but not mortal. He saw me and froze. His pupils widened, his jaw tightened. "You," he rasped, "you are ours." I nodded once briefly and walked on. He did not thank me, but he did not scream either. A small victory, one of the few I ever get. My path led to the center, to the target. The warp thread stretching to the throne hall thickened with every district. Somewhere beyond the city walls guns roared. The guard was trying to break through. Lemon rust tanks churned the mud. Assault companies hammered against barricades made of corpses. They needed days, perhaps weeks, to reach the center. I needed minutes. The former administration building, 3 stories, broad steps, colonnade, was wrapped like ivy. The walls breathed. The doors, gaping and toothed, living flesh along their edges, looked at me and whimpered. I walked through them, and the flesh charred from my presence fell away in black flakes, exposing ordinary rockreat and steel. Corridors, stairs, halls where clerks had once sat, stamped papers, drank recaf, and complained about superiors. Now the walls held frescoes of dried blood, and the ceiling was not a ceiling, but a window into the warp through which something vast, shimmering, nameless looked down. It saw me and looked away. Even it did not want to look at a Culexus. The throne hall, the doors stood open, beyond them silence, a silence I understood, the silence of waiting. I entered. He sat on the governor's throne. The throne had been remade. Bones, gold, plates covered with runes glowing blue. The hall was huge, echoing, with a high vaulted ceiling where once there had been a mosaic of the emperor. The mosaic had been stripped away. In its place they had painted an eye. The eye blinked. The man on the throne had once been a planetary astropath of middle age, middle height, middle appearance. Now he was a warlock of monstrous power, fed by Tzeentch to a level the Imperium classifies as alpha grade. His skin had a blue sheen, as if cold fire burned beneath it. Fingers, lengthened with extra joints, rested on the arms of the throne. Around his neck hung a necklace of tiny skulls. I knew each one was real. Around him were artifacts, dozens of them, amulets, wards, warp-focusing crystals, ancient runes forged before the Great Crusade. They smoked, frosted, cracked. He looked at me and did not run. The first psyker in my career who did not run. "I knew you would come," he said. His voice was calm, soft, like a teacher speaking to a disobedient child. "I saw you in the streams. A black spot, a tear in the weave. How many of my servants did you kill on the way?" I was silent. The target is talking, that is bad. Stone taught me. If a target talks, it is buying time. That means it has a plan. "Silent," he said, nodding. "They taught you to be silent the way a dog is taught not to bark. Sit, be quiet, kill on command. Good dog." The artifacts around him cracked louder. One crystal the size of a fist, hanging on a chain, split in two, and its fragments rang across the floor. My aura was pressing on them. A few more minutes and the protection would collapse. The warlock knew it and still did not run. I studied him. Through the oculum of the helmet, the lens built into the animus speculum, which allowed me to see what lay hidden behind psychic screens, I saw his true form. His warp imprint was enormous, 10 times larger than the physical shell. It burned like a pool of petrol, greasy, choking, dirty flame that devoured the oxygen around it. The threads stretching to him from every building, from every converted farmer, were his roots. He fed on them, sucked drop after drop from 200,000 broken souls, and every drop made him stronger. 3 months ago he had been an ordinary astropath, middling, sanctioned, with a brand on his eyelids and a record in the Adeptus Astra Telepathica registry. He relayed messages between stars and complained of migraines. Then came the whisper. Tzeentch, architect of fate, lord of change, the god who promises knowledge and gives it, and the price is always the same. You simply do not understand it until too late. I want to offer you a bargain, he said. I stopped not because I wanted to listen but because he touched my mind, not with a mental attack. No, that would not work, with something subtler. He found a crack thin as a hair, not in my defense, in my emptiness. You are wrong. I can give you a soul, said the warlock. The artifact on his chest cracked. Another crumbled to dust. There are powers that promise to fill even a void like yours. There are rights. There are texts beyond the veil. There are creatures claiming the Pariah gene is a lock and they have the key. One turning and you will feel the warp like everyone else. You will burn. You will be seen. You will be felt. He leaned forward. People will stop recoiling from you. You will sit in a mess hall and the person opposite will not overturn a tray in terror. You will walk down a street and a child will not cry. You will touch someone and that someone will not die. I stood, the helmet humming. The lens of the animus speculum was inactive, but the system was already warming. I felt heat in my forehead where the neural interfaces sat beneath the bone. Warmth, said the warlock. Do you know what warmth is? Not engine heat, not radiation from a plasma reactor. Human warmth, when someone lays a palm on your shoulder, when someone sits beside you and does not leave, when someone simply looks at you and does not turn away. I stood. My hands, black in sinskin, hung at my sides. I looked at them, at these hands no one had ever held, no one had ever touched without gloves, without protective screens, without disgust on the face. 1 second, 2, 3. Inside me, in the place where normal people have something warm and soft, something they call soul or conscience or hope. That place was empty. It had always been empty. I wanted it. Emperor, witness me, I wanted it. 3 seconds and the warlock smiled. He saw my weakness. He found the 1.0 demon, no psyker, no enemy had found in all my years of service. He found the boy who pressed his cheek to hot pipes because the pipes were not afraid of him. 4 seconds, 5. I lifted my head. The eye of the animus speculum began to hum, a low vibrating sound on the edge of hearing like the heartbeat of space. The lens began to open. The light inside it, sickly, greenish-black, the color of gangrene and mold, slowly kindled. The warlock's smile faltered. This is what I understood in those 5 seconds. He promised me a soul, warmth, love, the chance to be like everyone else. He offered me the key to the cage where I had spent my whole life. And do you know what? Perhaps somewhere behind the veil of the warp there truly were powers able to rewrite my nature. Chaos promises everything. Chaos can give everything. The price is what chaos does not warn you about. Sometimes the mind, sometimes the body, sometimes an entire world. I looked at the warlock, at his lengthened fingers, at his blue skin, at the necklace of skulls. 3 months ago he had been an ordinary astropath. He had a soul, real, living, burning in the warp with a steady flame. And he sold it at the first opportunity. Traded it for power, for knowledge, for dominion over 200,000 broken farmers. Those who have souls sell them at the first convenient moment. I had seen it again and again. Cultists, heretics, apostates, every one of them had once been an ordinary person with an ordinary soul, and they threw it away like a toy that had grown boring. I have no soul, I have nothing to sell, nothing to trade, nothing to betray. My emptiness is not my curse, it is the only thing in me that is clean. No, I said. The warlock threw up his hands, warp energy lashed from his palms. A violet hurricane, a whirl of pure madness, powerful enough to melt a tank. I opened the animus speculum to full power, to everything it had, without limiters, without restraint. The gates opened. I imagined how it looked from outside. The world around us bent. The walls of the hall covered with frost, real physical frost, no warp trick. The temperature fell 20 degrees in a second. The blood frescoes on the walls paled, lost color, turned gray. The eye on the ceiling, that blinking eye, spasmed, shuddered, tried to close, and mucus ran from beneath its lid. The warlock's artifacts shattered all at once. Crystals exploded into splinters, runes cracked, amulets melted, the skull necklace fell into dust. His protection, amassed over years, gathered grain by grain, bargained from warp things, was nullified in half a second. His hurricane, that violet world, did not reach me. It froze in the air like a frozen wave, then became transparent, then fell apart, scattering like smoke. For the first time in 3 months, the warlock felt fear, true fear. Not show fear, not theatrical fear, not fear as art. The same primal horror every psyker feels beside a Culexus. The horror of a creature whose connection to infinity is being taken away, who suddenly realizes that the warp, his source of power, his home, his God, does not hear him, does not see him, does not know he exists. No, he whispered, no, wait. I walked toward him calmly, step by step. The floor under my feet covered with frost, and the frost drew patterns, strange, inhuman, like prints of something that exists on the far side of emptiness. I will give you. He was choking. His blue skin paled. His lengthened fingers with extra joints curled, clenched, lost shape. The lens of the animus speculum burned at full force. The beam, narrow, focused, greenish-black, struck from the helmet's eye like a needle aimed directly at the center of the warlock's forehead. Negative psychic energy. Oxymoron, paradox, impossibility. But I was a walking impossibility, and from my helmet came what should not exist in nature. Anti-warp, anti-magic, anti-soul. The skin on the warlock's face cracked. Not from heat, not from impact, but from absence. The warp that had held his body together for 3 months, that had stitched the mutations into one, that had kept his organs from rejecting the changes, was leaving him, being drawn into my emptiness like water into a whirlpool. His face ran like a wax mask over flame, only without flame. Flesh lost cohesion, bones bared themselves, eyes filled with terror, wholly human eyes, because in the final second he became human again. Those eyes looked at me, and in them was what I had seen 1,000 times. Pleading. I did not stop. I never stop. The beam of the animus speculum struck him at full force, burned out his sorceress might. Then the personality, the mind, and the flesh. A clean surgical line of anti-energy against which there was no defense. When it was over, only gray ash fell from the throne. The eye on the ceiling closed and vanished. Blood stopped falling from the sky. The building stopped breathing. Silence, absolute, complete mine. I stood in the center of the empty hall, dusted with ash, and listened as the last echoes of the warp storm died. Somewhere far away on the edges of the city, guardsmen who a minute earlier had been going mad suddenly stopped and looked around, not understanding why they were aiming at a wall. Across the city, some came to themselves, some collapsed into hysterics, and some would never return to their former minds. Chaos rarely retreats neatly. I closed the helmet's eye, deactivated the animus speculum, engaged the dampers, suppressed the aura to minimum. Beyond the hall doors, footsteps, heavy, military with the clank of gear. The doors burst inward. An assault group, 10 guardsmen, 2 sergeants, 1 lieutenant commissar, lasguns ready, shield generators humming. Their faces carried soot, blood, the imprint of 4 weeks of hell. They saw the hall, the ash on the floor, the throne split in two, and me, a black figure in the center of the hall, a helmet like an elongated skull with a dead eye, skin matte black without a single glint, cables running from the back of the head to the spine. No weapon, no insignia, only emptiness spilling from me in waves despite the dampers. The lieutenant, young, about 25, with a cut brow and shaking hands, stopped at the threshold. He knew an officio assassinorum asset had arrived on the planet. They had not told him the temple, not the name. Only that a special asset had been deployed, do not interfere. He had seen what this place had been 5 minutes earlier. Living hell, a warp storm, a city crawling with demons, and he saw what it had become. Empty hall, ash, silence. He should have thanked me, saluted, or at least nodded. Instead he went pale, his lips tightened into a line. His hand twitched toward the aquila on his chest, instinctively, unconsciously. He took 1 step back, small and barely noticeable, but back. The private to his right, a large man with a heavy jaw, bent over and vomited onto his boots. He did not understand why. He was a veteran. He had seen demons and not flinched. He had survived 4 weeks in this hell, but from my presence his body rebelled like it had been poisoned. The commissar, the only one who did not sway, slowly removed his hand from the last pistol. His face was stone, but through the helmet's psyoculum I saw the vein at his temple pounding madly. His body wanted to run. His training would not allow it. Compromise, stone face and pulsing vein. I walked toward the exit, straight at them. They parted all at once without command, like water before a ship's prow. Pressed themselves to walls, jambs, columns. Lasguns lowered, eyes on the floor, on the walls, anywhere but me. One private, a boy of 18 with fuzz on his upper lip and eyes not yet burned out by nightmare, looked straight into my visor. By chance his eyes met the dead lens of the animus speculum. 1 second. He lost consciousness, simply fell like the captain's first officer aboard the Aquila Nullies. No one picked him up. All watched me pass. All were silent. No thank you, no in the Emperor's name, not one word. Only a relieved breath when I turned the corner and my cold could no longer reach them. Behind me I heard a sergeant whisper, "Holy Throne, what was that?" And the commissar answered in a steady, rehearsed voice. "That was nothing. You saw nothing. You stormed this hall and found the traitor's body destroyed by orbital bombardment. Write that in the report, all of it. That is an order. Perhaps in a week or 2 a man in gray will come to some of those guardsmen, speak softly, offer help with combat trauma, lay them on a cot, attach electrodes to their temples, and when the guardsman rises, he will remember neither the black figure in the hall, nor the dead eye of the helmet, nor the nausea, nor the terror. He will remember an explosion, an orbital strike, victory. Everything he is supposed to remember, everything he is permitted. Or perhaps no one will come. Perhaps the officio will decide this mission is not worth a purge. Then the guardsmen will remember. They will wake in sweat, remembering the black figure in the Hall of Ash, and no one will ever confirm that it truly happened. They will erase me from their memories like chalk from a school slate. Stone said, "You are a ghost. You work and disappear." He did not lie. The only person in my life who did not lie. Corridors, stairs, exit. The street no longer hanging in the air, normal now, ruined, buried in debris, but normal. The sky gray, ordinary, without warp. Rain. Ordinary cold, wet rain. On the street corner stood a civilian woman, one of the survivors. Her dress was torn, her hair filthy, in her arms a child wrapped in rags. She was limping toward the square where Ministrorum medical tents were being unfolded. When she saw me, she froze. The child in her arms began to whimper softly, painfully, like a kitten. I stopped. She looked at me, not at the helmet, not at the sinskin, at my eyes, and in her gaze there was no horror, only wild, bottomless fear mixed with something I did not immediately recognize. Then I understood gratitude. She had seen the warp storm scatter, seen the sky return, seen the demons vanish, and she knew or felt that it had something to do with me. She opened her mouth, tried to say something, the word caught. I saw her lips move, saw her throat tighten. My cold would not release her, it would not allow it. The body refused to think a monster, even if the mind wanted to. She lowered her eyes, held the child tighter and went on, making a wide arc around me. I stood another second and watched her go. A small bent figure with an infant in her arms against the ruined city and the gray sky. Then I walked on. The evacuation shuttle waited in the square, small, black, without markings. The pilot behind the armored cockpit glass did not turn his head. He had been ordered not to look. I entered and sat in my chair, the only chair in a cargo bay built for 20 people, one chair for one. The hatch closed. The shuttle trembled, lifted from the ground, began to climb. Through the porthole I watched Centaurus 4 shrink. Gray, wet, wounded, but alive. 20 million people who would wake tomorrow and not remember who saved them, or remember and feel sick, like that private, like that sailor, like everyone who has ever stood beside me longer than a minute. I removed the helmet, laid it on my knees, and ran a hand over my face. Bald, pale, hollow, with dark circles beneath watery gray eyes. I am 37 or 38 or 41. The temple prolongs the lives of its assassins, with chemistry, regimen, augmetics, injections they give me once every standard year. I may have 200 years, 300, perhaps more, if the Culexus temple considers me valuable enough to preserve. 200 years, 300 years, every day like this. Mission, isolation. Mission, isolation. Sometimes cryo-sleep when I am not in use. You lie down in a chamber, close your eyes, and when you open them, 20 years have passed and the world has changed and you have not. The Officio Assassinorum does not make weapons from steel. Steel weapons break, rust, wear out. The Officio works more subtly. They take a child rejected by his own mother, feared by rats, impossible to love, physically impossible on the level of brain chemistry and the biology of the species. They take his total, absolute, unalloyed loneliness and sharpen it for years, for decades. They implant metal into his bones, cables into his nerves, a relic helmet onto his head, one that can turn emptiness into a weapon. They teach him to control that emptiness, the same emptiness that made animals shy away and mothers go mad. They turn his curse into a blade. And that blade kills sorcerers, kills demons, kills chosen of the dark gods, those from whom space marines step back, those before whom inquisitors tremble. A blade before which even the miracles of chaos go dark. A blade of loneliness raised to the absolute. Do you know the strangest thing? I am not angry at the temple that gutted me and filled me with metal. I am not angry at the Imperium that uses me like a disposable syringe full of poison. Anger is when you feel injustice, and injustice is when the world is not as it should be. But I do not know what the world should be. I have no model for comparison, no memory of a warm home, of a family dinner, of a hand on the shoulder. I have nothing against which to measure my life. It is the only life there is. A circle, endless, perfect, merciless. Then I stop thinking because thinking is a luxury. A weapon does not think. A weapon waits for the order. The shuttle climbed. The engines hummed evenly, monotonously, almost soothingly. The cargo bay was empty, 20 seats and me, alone. I placed my hands on the armrests, black, wrapped in sinskin. Hands that today destroyed a warlock fed by a dark god. hands no one will ever touch. I was not in pain. I was not sad. I do not have the equipment for that. I simply knew, with the same clarity with which I know the ballistics of the animus speculum beam or the resonance frequency of a delta-class warp field, knew it as fact, as formula, as axiom. Ahead are hundreds of years, and in those hundreds of years no human being, no living creature in the whole boundless, endless galaxy swarming with trillions of souls will touch my hand with warmth. The shuttle reached orbit. Stars burned beyond the porthole, each one with planets, with people, with life. Distant, bright, warm alien. I closed my eyes.